Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to present to you all the top 10 Warhammer 40k armies of February 2020. February was the first month after the LVO, which is by far the biggest 40k tournament in the world, and the meta of the month following that event usually follows in its footsteps, and the armies of February stays true to that statement for the most part. But there are some exciting additions to the top 10 this time around that a lot of you probably aren't expecting. So before we hop into the top 10 armies, let's go over how these placings work. So I look at the top 4 armies from all GT and major events that took place during a certain month, and in this case, that month is February. And the armies that had the most top 4 placings get a higher spot on the list, with the tiebreaker being what those placings actually were. As for how I categorize armies, I go codex by codex, meaning stuff like all the Astra Militarum regiments will count as Astra Militarum armies, and all the different craft worlds will count as craft world armies, and so on. The only new exception to this rule, which was highly requested and will probably make a decent amount of you happy, I am now going to divide the Space Marine Codex into its different chapters. The reason being is because each of those chapters does have a dedicated supplement, which is basically a mini codex for each one of those chapters. So that's how I'm going to justify it. Also, I will determine the main faction of an army list based on which faction had the most points spent on it. So for example, if there is a list with 1200 points of Imperial Knights and 800 points of Astra Militarum, then I will consider that list to be an Imperial Knight list. And that covers everything you need to understand for how these rankings work. And now with all that said, let's now dive into the top 10 armies of February 2020. Number 10, Sisters of Battle and Imperial Knights. We have a tie this month for the 10th spot. Sisters of Battle and Imperial Knights both had 2 top 4 placings, and they were the exact same placings. So to be honest, I'm still learning about Sisters of Battle because up until recently, they were the rarest army in the game, and I've never actually played against the army until very recently. But with their new plastic models, which are much less expensive than their old metal models, we're actually seeing more and more Sisters armies at tournaments since it doesn't cost selling a kidney on the black market to afford it anymore. Their miracle dice mechanic is really cool, and also allows the army to take a tiny bit of RNG out of the equation. Do you really need to do d6 damage with one of your exorcists? Use a miracle dice. Do you really need to make that invulnerable save on Celestine? Use a miracle dice. Do you really need to win a game of Warhammer 40k? Then get good, scrub. Celestine is still one of the best characters in the game in my opinion. She used to be played a lot in Imperial soup lists until she received some nerfs which stopped her from seeing so much play in Imperium armies. But now that her actual faction has some good rules and models to go with her, she will definitely be seeing a lot of play at tournaments again. As for the rest of the army, Seraphim are incredibly good, possibly one of the best units in the army in my opinion. With a stratagem, they can shoot when they come in from deep strike and shoot again in the following shooting phase, while also increasing the range of their pistols by 6 inches. And in a Bloody Rose attachment, all those pistols gain an extra -1 AP. They can also then charge and tie something up to stop it from shooting on the following turn, and this is pretty easy too because of miracle dice. Then we have the Repentia, who are pretty damn good in close combat, especially when used in the order of Bloody Rose, which gives them extra AP on their attacks when they charge. As for the Imperial Knights, well, not much really needs to be said about these monstrosities. They are big, beefy boys that can be pretty hard to kill, and also can kill stuff pretty easily. Combine them with some Astra Militarum allies or AdMech allies to provide some extra firepower or to camp objectives, and you got a pretty decent list. Number 9, Astra Militarum and Tyranids. We have another tie on the top 10 this month, this time between the Terran military and some Australian wildlife. Let's talk about the Zerg first, since it's been a while since they've graced us with their presence on the top 10 list. The first list is all Hail Hydra, making use of some Genestealer bombs being slingshotted by the Swarmlord, which is basically Tyranid's bread and Vegemite. They also include some warriors and Ahara specs though, which are some units we really haven't seen on top tables in a very long time. With the recent changes to ITC scoring, and specifically the secondary gangbusters, and with repeated points decreases from chapter approved, Tyranid warriors are now a pretty good unit in the ITC format. As for the Ahara specs, it looks like it can be a pretty decent horde killer since it can generate more attacks for every model it kills, and with Psychic Awakening it has a stratagem to reroll all its hit rolls, but to be honest that looks like all it really has going for it. I haven't really seen one of these things in a game before, since meta nids for the longest time have only ever really been Flyrant spam for a bit before the rule of 3, and then Gaunt spam, and then Genestealer spam with the Swarmlord and character support with stuff like Hiveguard and Exocrines. Speaking of which, that's pretty much exactly what the second Tyranids list is. For the Imperial Guard, the first list is a Talon list, featuring 3 tank commanders making use of the Emperor's Fist formation, 60 infantry, some Astropaths, Hellhounds, Basilisks, and a Baneblade. I assume the Astropaths are to buff up the Baneblade, giving it +1 to its saving throws, and making it -1 to hit. and the rest of the list is pretty straightforward. Infantry to screen for the tanks and grab objectives outside your deployment zone, Hellhounds to do the same for the most part and help deal with units that have negative to hit modifiers, and the Basilisks to deal with stuff that's hiding out of line of sight, like those pesky Space Marine Thunderfire cannons. And the second list is more or less the same, but this time it's Cadian, and instead of bringing a super heavy tank, this player opted for more Leman Russes and an Inquisitor, which both received some pretty good buffs recently. The Leman Russes because now they have access to tank aces, which make them better in different ways depending on how you want to use them, and the Inquisitor brings access to a bunch of good stratagems and also some psychic spells. Number 8. Imperial Fists. The Sons of Dorn are Imperial Fisting their way into the top 10 this month with 2 top 4 placings during the month of February, with one of their placings being slightly better than the Guard and Nids to beat them out in the tiebreaker. So Imperial Fists are my personal favorite chapter from the Space Marine Codex, and I've been really enjoying playing that chapter for a while now. The chapter tactic is probably my favorite chapter tactic for a shooting army. It allows the army to ignore cover, and it gives extra hits on rolls of 6s when using bolt weapons. This usually means you can drown your opponent in bolter fire, with stuff like Hurricane Bolters, any of the Intercessor bolt weapons, and Heavy Bolters. Also, their Doctrine gives them +1 damage with their heavy weapons against vehicles, which makes stuff like Suppressor Autocannons amazing at taking down vehicles with their 3 damage, and Heavy Bolters on Centurions doing 2 damage a pop. They also have some stratagems which make them nuke vehicles as well. So before the recent Doctrine changes, Imperial Fist could just look at an Imperial Knight and it would fall apart quicker than the old Abaddon model. Basically, Imperial Fist were the vehicle destroyers, and still are to an extent, even after the changes. Just with the recent Doctrine changes, vehicle-heavy lists have a slightly more even matchup against the army now. Also because of Imperial Fist's trait to ignore cover, their artillery is really good, even if it's just splashed into a Space Marine soup list, since most stuff you can't see is normally hiding in cover, and your artillery can just ignore that. Overall, I really love this faction and look forward to seeing what players do with them in the future after the Doctrine nerfs. Spoiler alert, it's probably going to be Intercessor spam with some Centurions or artillery spam still. Number 7. Carey. The Dominatrix faction comes in with 2 top 4 placings during the month of February, with those placings being slightly better than Imperial Fist to beat them out in the tiebreaker. Carey is another army that I enjoy playing competitively. In fact, it was probably my first truly competitive army since Chaos Space Marines were kinda garbage for a while at the beginning of 8th edition. But anyways, Carey hits fast and hard, and also ramps up as the game goes on because of their Power from Pain ability. The new ITC changes definitely benefit the army a lot as well, since Carey is incredibly good at maxing out recon and behind enemy lines by turn 3 now. For the events these lists placed at, I'm not sure if they were using new ITC updates, but even if they weren't, Carey was still pretty good at getting those secondaries while denying secondary choices to the opponent for the most part, depending on their build. But with the new ITC changes, Carey also got slightly nerfed as well, since Venom spam now gives up Big Game Hunter, so no more dodging secondaries with those pesky Venoms anymore. As for the list for this month, the first one is mainly a Coven and a Cult, with some Blackheart Ravagers and Venoms. The Witches can kill some chaff infantry, but can also easily hold infantry in combat, so they are really good at locking enemy infantry units in combat. While the Coven stuff is very durable, but also packs a hard punch. And the Ravagers make use of the Rid of the Living Muse relic on the Archon, so they get rerolls of 1s to hit and 1s to wound, which makes them incredibly efficient at nuking stuff like Primaris Marines. And the second list is some good old Venom spam, with some Rax and Mandrakes and 3 Razorwing Jet Fighters. Also, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Drazar is featured in both of these lists, and for good reason too. That guy is a beast. I've been testing him out recently in my games, and holy crap can that dude put out some damage. If you're a Carey player and haven't been using Drazar, I highly recommend you pick up the new model. He's 100% worth it. Number 6. Blood Angels. The definitely not vampires Space Marines comes in 6th this month with 4 top 4 placings during the month of February. With the addition of their Psychic Awakening book, Blood Angels have been making their way back into the meta and are probably the best melee focused chapter in the game currently. Now that Blood Angels can benefit from doctrines, there's an actual incentive to play them as a mono army now instead of souping them up with Astra Militarum. With that said though, Blood Angels are still very good in soup because they synergize incredibly well with Catachan Astra Militarum, but also Imperial Fist as well. I personally think if I were to play Blood Angels myself, I would soup them up with some Imperial Fist artillery. This way you can still benefit from your regular doctrines, but still have a decent gun line to help you clear the screen for your charges or to deal with backline threats that your charges will have a hard time getting to. Blood Angels can be deceptively mobile though, because they have a stratagem to pick up a jump pack unit off the table and immediately deep strike it anywhere on the board up to 9 inches away from enemy models, and then you can give that unit a 3d6 charge. This is incredibly good on a Smash Captain since he's only one model and you can usually find a nice little space to drop him in the backline line so he can kill some tanks or some characters. Especially if you give him the Angel's Wing relic, which allows him to ignore Overwatch. So you can charge like a bunch of different tanks like Lehman Russes or something and have no fear that your Smash Captain is going to die on the charge. They also have some good stratagems for Sanguinary Guard in the new Psychic Awakening book, which is probably why we're seeing a lot more of those units being used as well. Overall though, I'm really enjoying seeing Blood Angels back in the meta since they are one of my favorite chapters of Marines, and I hope this trend continues. Number 5. Grey Knights. That's right folks, the time has finally come. Grey Knights are no longer a joke army and are now good enough to get top placings at events. I made a video about Grey Knights recently reviewing the rules from the new Psychic Awakening book, and I predicted that the way of playing the army would be 2 battalions with a bunch of supporting characters and some big blob of paladins. And sure enough, my prediction came to be. Lawrence from Tabletop Tactics was the first person to put Grey Knights on the map, going second at a major event. So the idea is that you bring a bunch of strike squads, deep strike most if not all of them, and hide one of your units of paladins along with your supporting characters. You super buff the paladins to the heavens so that it's incredibly hard for your opponent to kill them, and this is with a combination of stratagems and psychic spells. Then turn 2, if the right situation presents itself, you deep strike a ton of stuff in and beta strike the enemy pretty hard. Depending on what you're up against, you can either go with the Smite Tide or the Psi Tide, which by the way, Tides are like the Grey Knights version of chapter doctrines that regular Marines have. With the Smite Tide making Grey Knight Smites a flat 2 mortal wounds for the most consistent smites in the game, and the Psi Tide gives Psi weapons an extra -1 AP and an extra damage per shot. A cool trick with this too is you can bring a unit of 10 paladins all with Stormbolters, and another unit with as many Psi Cannons or Silencers that you can fit into it. The Psi Cannon unit gets the benefits for those weapons for the Psi Tide, while the Stormbolters in the other unit can benefit from the Psi Tide as well, because you can turn those Stormbolters into Psi weapons by using the stratagem Psi Bolt Ammunition, which gives them +1 strength and -1 AP. Another cool combo is moving one of the units of paladins up the board and overbuffing them so it's incredibly hard for the opponent to kill them, and then you use a spell on the other unit of paladins that allows them to shoot and then move. So you can pop out of cover, shoot, and then move them back behind the wall so your opponent can't shoot them unless they have artillery. So this forces your opponent to only be able to see the big overbuffed unit of paladins that they're going to have a hard time killing. There are lots of cool combos in the army, way too many to go over here, but if you want a quick rundown of how the army works, then check out my review of Grey Knights. There should be a little card popping up in the top right corner of your screen, so click on that to be brought to that video. Also, I look forward to Pig Knight's comment on this video. He's been a viewer now for a couple of years, and he's been commenting the same comment on a lot of my videos, which is sad Grey Knight noises. But that trend is over now, my friend, and we can finally have happy Grey Knight noises now. Number 4. Craft Worlds. The Vanilla Eldar get 4th this month with 5 top 4 placings during the month of February. So this time around we have some diversity, but also a few overlapping units in these lists. Lots of Dark Reapers, Shining Spears, Night Spinners, and Wave Serpents. So the Night Spinners are usually taken in a custom craft world, which gives them the abilities to ignore cover, which is great for dealing with Space Marines since their 2+ save can be very annoying when they're in cover, and also the ability to reroll 1 hit roll and 1 rune roll to make them a bit more efficient in shooting. Crimson Hunter Exarchs are still seen in some lists as well, even though their points did increase from the last chapter approved. They are still an incredibly good unit in Allay Talk, because -2 to hit is nothing to scoff at. Fire Prisms are starting to see a bit more play as well, I assume due to the points decreases in recent chapter approved, which makes them a more viable gunline option. That also combined with custom craft world traits, which can boost them up a little bit as well. And they also have a stratagem that they come with that is pretty good, that probably not a lot of you know about because nobody really played Fire Prisms for a while. So how this stratagem works is you pick 1 Fire Prism that can see a target it's within range of, then you can decide to link fire with other Fire Prisms you have in your list. And if you do so, the other Fire Prisms can shoot at that target without needing line of sight or range, and they can re-roll their hit and wound rolls, while the original Fire Prism can also re-roll its hit and wound rolls against that target as well. It's actually an incredibly efficient stratagem for the cost of 1 command point. There's also some new units in these lists as well that we don't see very often, like Hornets, Warp Hunters, and Striking Scorpions. With the new addition of custom craft worlds though, it looks like a lot more units are getting a chance to see top tables at events, which I think is a very good thing. Number 3. Chaos Space Marines. The Heretic Astartes had 6 top 4 placings during the month of February, sealing them a spot in the top 3 of February. And you might be surprised as well, it's not all possessed bombs this time around, which is the new meta list for Chaos for the most part. Only 2 of these lists are actually possessed bomb, and the rest are kinda similar while also being a little different at the same time. So the first list is a possessed bomb, but different from the norm since they are Slanesh possessed instead of the Nurgle possessed like we're used to. So with this variation, you can only have a -3 to hit Disco Lord, but to be honest, that's honestly enough for the most part. You don't really need -4 except for in certain matchups. But with Slaanesh, you can actually give your possessed a 5+ feel no pain for when they do eventually get into combat, and it makes them a little bit more durable, alongside that 4+ invulnerable save. And you can also actually advance and charge with these guys because of the Slaanesh loci that you get from the Slaanesh Chaos Demon characters. And on top of that, the Slaanesh Demon characters bring a spell that allows you to make a Slaanesh Demon unit fight in the Psychic phase. So that will work on the Possessed because they do have the Slaanesh and Demon keywords. So this can allow your Possessed to start murdering units they tagged in combat in the previous fight phase with pile in and consolidate shenanigans. So they do lose out on double damage from that one Nurgle spell and a couple of modifiers to their wound rolls, but honestly it's not necessarily needed since they usually kill whatever they touch anyways. So this combo in theory should allow them to kill more stuff through tagging units in combat. The second list is pretty much the same thing, but instead of Alpha Legion they took Night Lords Possessed, so I assume they just let their Possessed tank shots while running up the board. They can make them -1 to hit with a Night Lord stratagem and give them the 5+ feel no pain and 4+ invul, but that requires you to go first, and it also allows your Possessed to get pretty screwed by the Tremor Cell stratagem that Space Marines use, and that's still pretty common in the meta. So personally, I think I'd rather play the first list over this one if I were to play a Possessed Bomb in a GT or Major. The third list is Obliterator and Deredeo spam, this time being Iron Warriors, which allows them to do a ton of damage to vehicles with bonuses. If you wanted a predominantly shooting list for Chaos, this is probably your best bet right now. The fourth list has a Rubric Marine and Noise Marine bombs, which looks pretty cool. I don't have much insight on this list though, and anything I say about it would just be speculating, so let's move on. And last but not least, the fifth Chaos list is actually my friend's list and also a patron of mine, Chris Vo, who is also known as Hot Cold Man in the Patreon Discord. He placed 4th at a GT with this list. So instead of me telling you a bit about the list, I figured it would be better to just hear what he has to say about it since it is his list. Before we get into him talking about his list though, I just want to apologize ahead of time because the audio for his recording does cut in and out a little bit every now and then. So yeah, I just wanted to apologize about that ahead of time.
The list concept centered around using the character keyword to allow a Thousand Suns Exalted Sorcerer to take advantage of the Cult of Magic with the relic Arcane Focus for +1 to cast and the trait Devastating Sorcery for +1 Mortal Wound on Mortal Wound generating spell. Astral Blast and Infernal Gateway synergize extremely well with the trait, relic, and the stratagem Kabbalistic for another +2 to cast. Having +3 to cast on the Exalted Sorcerer makes Super Smites and Super Infernal Gateways pretty easy to pull off. The Plague Burst Crawlers were used as super resilient character screens, which also discourage getting close to my characters due to their double Plague Spin. The Poxbringers would heal them or just throw out more Smites. The Lord's Discordant acted as an immediate threat that needed to be dealt with, since the opponent knew that I could just warp time them straight up. And it took the heat off of the Plague Burst Crawlers, allowing them to survive to the end of the game. The Helldrakes and Warp Talons of the Night Lords detachment focused on denying things like Chapter Master auras through the stratagem Vox Scream and tying things up. And I knew I was going to be facing a lot of Chapter Master auras since this was in the height of the Marine meta before the latest FAQ. I also used them to punish positioning mistakes by my opponent if they gave me an opening to drop in Warp Talons without them being Auspex scanned. For secondaries, I took Recon every game and used the high mobility of the Night Lords to help score it. I also took Engineers 3 out of 5 games and used it on a Plague Burst Crawler and tried to just park it on a midfield objective. Since I wasn't looking to deal damage with the Plague Burst Crawler, if it could just sit there and act as a screen and then score me Engineer points, it was a win all around. Finally, Brady, I have to thank you for giving me valuable feedback and helping me to fine-tune this list. I'm not saying I couldn't have done it without you, but being a patron and on the Discord definitely makes it a hell of a lot easier.
And that was everything Chris had to say about his list. I'm proud of him, I've been helping him out for a while, and I'm really glad that he was able to get a good placing at an event and make his way into this top 10. With that said, if you guys like that part of the video, like me putting in a player talking about their list in the top 10, let me know down in the comments because I can try to get some more players who played these lists at tournaments and get them to say little snippets in the video as well. It was really easy this time because Chris is a patron of mine and he's in my Patreon Discord, so it was just as simple as making a call to him. But yeah, I can try that out again in the future if that's something you guys and gals like. Number 2, Raven Guard. The Sneaky Marines come in second this month with 7 top 4 placings during the month of February. So every one of these lists is a Raven Guard successor, making use of the long-ranged marksman trait and either Master Artisans, Stealthy, or Hungry for Battle traits. Basically, these armies are Assault Centurion spam. You deep strike some of the Centurion units and infiltrate another one of the units with the Master of Ambush Warlord trait. Fortunately though, the recent Space Marine FAQ changed this so you can no longer infiltrate Centurions. But even still, I think this is still going to be a very strong list moving forward because now you can just deep strike strike all 3 Centurions, or you can start one of the units on the board turn 1, just hide them, and then pop out and shoot after that. So before the nerfs, turn 1 you would sometimes infiltrate your Grav Centurions if you're against something like Marines or Custodes or other elite armies, or you can infiltrate a unit of Assault Centurions against Horde armies because they could use their Flamers and Hurricane Bolters to easily clear the chaff. And then they could also charge to clear even more chaff. Then on turn 2, you would bring in the other Centurions from Deep Strike and go to town. You usually also include some scouts as cheap infantry tax to get your battalion command points, but even then they are still useful for camping objectives while the rest of your army puts in the heavy lifting. You also sometimes see some Eliminators, and in this meta I think Eliminators are an auto-include in any Space Marine army, to be honest. They're so good at killing characters, or even just threatening characters, so your opponent is forced to play in a certain way, which is usually always a good thing. And you can also include some Thunderfire cannons to help slow down units or just clear some chaff that's hiding out of line of sight. Overall though, Raven Guard is a very good army right now, and even with the recent changes, I think Raven Guard will most likely be number 1 or number 2 again in next month's top 10. And now before we get into the best army of February 2020, let's give some honorable mentions. These armies had at least one top 4 placing at GT and major events during February, but either didn't get enough placings or lost out in tiebreakers, so they didn't make the actual list. So this month we have Tau with 2 placings, Chaos Knights with 2 placings, Orcs with 2 placings, Space Wolves with 1 placing, Custodes with 1 placing, Thousand Suns with 1 placing, and Dark Angels with 1 placing. It's nice to see Space Puppers and Dark Angels getting some good showings at events now, since for a while they were the worst chapters in the game other than Grey Knights, so it's nice to see them doing well. Now if only Death Watch could step up their game, and then we'd have all the Space Marine armies doing well in the meta. And now, the best army of February, you all probably guessed it, it's Iron Hands. Guy Fieros and his army had 20 top 4 placings during the month of February, so yeah. Fortunately though, Games Workshop took notice of this and released the new FAQ not too long ago that nerfed Iron Hand's current meta build pretty hard. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, check out my Space Marine nerf video. There should be a card popping up in the right corner of this vid that will take you there. So anyways, not all 20 of these lists are the full meta build. Some of them are slight variations and a couple of them kind of do something similar but also kind of do their own thing. So let's talk about the meta build, which should be pretty much dead after these nerfs. So it involved bringing 2 to 4 units of 10 intercessors with a Thunder Hammer in each, all equipped with Stalker bolt rifles. You upgrade their detachment to the Indomitus Crusader formation. You also bring Forge Master Pharaohs, an upgraded Apothecary, some Chaplain Dreads, and a character Leviathan Dreadnought. So you make the Leviathan a character with an Iron Hand stratagem. This gives it access to another Iron Hand stratagem that allows it to pass off wounds to nearby infantry squads, which in this case would be your intercessors. This is of course after it's failed its armor saves and invul saves, which were already hard to get through since it was a 4+ invulnerable save and 2+ armor at toughness 8. And this was also after subtracting damage because of the stratagem Duty Eternal, which halved incoming damage on the Dread, and the Relic Ironstone, which subtracted another 1 damage. So essentially, if you shot 3 or 4 damage weapons at the Leviathan, it would only take 1 damage per shot, and then if that made it through its saves, it would then pass that on to the intercessors. And when it does pass unsaved wounds on to the intercessors, your intercessors have a 5+ feel no pain because of an upgrade that the Apothecary can get from the Faith and Fury supplement. So there's a small chance that those infantry don't even take wounds either while saving the Leviathan from harm, and pretty much no damage happens. But if some damage does get through, then the Apothecary can bring back dead infantry who took the wounds for the Leviathan, and Pharaohs can heal the Leviathan back up if you chose to not pass over any wounds onto your infantry. Pharaohs would also give a 5+ invul to all the infantry, making them more durable against other Marine lists that were spamming heavy weapons, so mirror matches, Dark Angels, and Imperial Fists, and you could preemptively use your Warlord trait from the Indomitus Crusader detachment to make all your intercessors ignore -1 AP from -1 AP weapons. So against stuff like Raven Guard Centurion spam, you could ignore all the -1 AP from their Hurricane Bolters and Flamers in turn 2, and you could force the Raven Guard player to wait until turn 3 to drop, which will allow you to get some more boar control while the Centurions aren't around yet. And in other matchups, you could also use the Formation Warlord trait to have your intercessors leave combat and shoot, or advance and charge, or ignore cover and get exploding hits on 6s. It really just depends on what you need. It's honestly probably the best toolbox formation in the game. On top of that, you have the Chaplain Dreads, which are really good for their points because they can't be shot at. They come with 2 last cannons, and they're pretty good in close combat as well. And then on top of that, you also have all the regular Iron Hand shenanigans, like every unit in the army being able to reroll 1s to hit for their heavy weapons, while not suffering -1 to hit from moving and shooting their heavy weapons, a stratagem that allows a unit to overwatch on 4+, a stratagem that allows a unit to deny a spell on 4+, and a lot more stuff. So to summarize it, it was an army that even if you did put some damage on it, it would just heal that damage back and make you feel like you've accomplished nothing. All while they're dishing out damage to your army and just either shooting you or assaulting you to dust. So with the new nerfs to the army, you can actually now be able to kill their stuff, which is a good thing. It's definitely more balanced, but with everything Iron Hand still has going for them, I'm positive they aren't completely dead, and we should still see them popping up here and there in future top tables. With this metal is gone though, and with all the changes altogether for Space Marines, I am very looking forward to the upcoming meta and seeing how things unfold. And that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content like this. Also, keep an eye out for my new guide videos, which I'm in the process of working on. I've been saying it for a while, but I want to get back to the channel's roots and start producing more guides to help players out on their 40k journey. So again, look out for those, and make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon to be notified when I make those videos in the future. Also, if you want to help support the channel even further to allow me to continue making content like this and my guides, please check me out on Patreon. Without Patreon, I literally wouldn't be able to make these videos, since I wouldn't be able to dedicate as much time as I do to making the videos or playing 40k in general. I am also starting the process of getting things together to start putting battle reports on the channel as well. The main focus of these battle reports is to have games with optimized and competitive army lists in the ITC format. Essentially, they will be simulating and showcasing what tournaments are like. I've noticed these types of battle reports are incredibly rare on YouTube, and so I would like to make that a thing for the community. This requires me though to get a studio where I can actually fit a table to play on. So I need a lot of support in order to get this project off the ground. I don't feel like making a Kickstarter or anything, since I'd rather not ask for free money. Instead, I just ask you check me out on Patreon, where for your pledge, I offer many different rewards. Stuff like exclusive access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord, where you can chat with myself and other patrons, and actually a few people that have done well at GTs and majors like myself and Chris from this video. I also offer list building advice and even customized list building as well, and even coaching sessions with myself where I can help you improve certain aspects of your 40k game. I'll be making a short video about this in the future, but I really could use as much help as I can get monetarily, because it's going to be a hefty investment to get the new place where I can record comfortably and the equipment I'll need to produce high quality battle reports. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, please consider making a pledge on Patreon to help me out so I can achieve this goal. Any and all help would be appreciated. With that said, thanks to all my current patrons for helping me out and allowing me to make videos like this for the community. Without you guys and gals, none of this would be possible, so thank you all very much. And thanks to all of you who watch my videos. You guys and gals are awesome, and I'm glad that you enjoy the content. So I guess with that said, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.